I stepped off the red-eye into New Jersey air that felt denser than the Iberian breeze I'd left behind. The conference badge still hung from my neck, a plastic square that clicked against my zipper as I moved through the arrivals hall. I'd spent a week discussing budgets and risk models in rooms with floor-to-ceiling windows. I thought of calling my daughter the moment I cleared customs, then told myself I'd surprise her, instead show up with almond pastries from the airport cafe and a story about a museum guard who hummed while I stood in front of a blue abstract. It felt like the sort of small gentleness that could repair a week apart. The rideshare dropped me in front of my row house just before sunrise. Street lamps were snapping off one by one like eyelids closing. The porch light set on a timer shone dutifully over a stack of circulars and a single white envelope propped against the frame. I knew my name, Nora Hale, in every style of handwriting I'd ever seen it written. This blocky print was not one of them. The return address read Steve Barrow Medical Center in a blue stamp. Beneath, in smaller letters, to the family of Iris Hale. My key slipped, scraped, and landed somewhere in the pocket of my coat, as if my hands had briefly forgotten how to be useful. I told myself there would be a clerical error inside some scheduling form, a bill, anything routine. I slid a fingernail under the flap and tore along the seam. A single page. The sentence at the top moved toward me, and then the floor went uncertain. Your daughter is in the intensive care unit. Please contact the ICU desk as soon as possible. The page listed a direct number. I read it twice to fix it in my mind, then again because it wouldn't fix. There is a way the body chooses for you in such moments. I was already in the kitchen phone on speaker, the receiver ringing into a large, indifferent silence. A woman answered with a voice that sounded practiced at being steady. St. Barrow, ICU. This is Dana. My daughter's name is Iris. Iris Hale, I said. I received a letter. Papers rustled. Date of birth. I gave it. My own mouth answered questions in a tone I recognized from meetings where I had to seem entirely in control. She was admitted 5 days ago following a motor vehicle collision, Dana read. She underwent neurosurgical intervention on day 1. She is ventilated and sedated. Current status is critical but stable. 5 days. I tried to locate 5 days ago and received a flash of a cafe window. Rain dots my hand, half risen to wave at no one. Can I speak to her physician? Dr. Romero will be rounding shortly, the woman said. We can notify him you're here. Are you her next of kin? Yes, I said, though the word snagged in my throat like a button. I'm her mother. You'll need identification at the front desk. We'll have a band for you. I'm coming now. I left the suitcase by the door, a small square of life paused mid-motion. The house smelled faintly of lemons from the cleaner I'd run before I left. A smell I had thought would be welcoming and now seemed like the memory of someone else's kitchen. Outside, the sky was a blue steel sheet. I drove without music. The roads were slick from night mist, and the traffic lights, one after another, felt like instructions I needed to pass. In the mirror, my mouth had become a thin line, the kind you draw when the ruler is the only instrument you trust. St. Barrow's lobby was newly renovated, the way a photograph can be newly framed, glossy floors, a spray of tropical leaves in a tall silver cylinder, a digital directory that was already half chipped in the corner. The volunteer at the desk slid a visitor sticker to me and pointed to the elevators. I saw my reflection in the mirrored doors, travel clothes hair pinned in a way I'd intended for sleeping, and thought you could be anyone walking into any building carrying any news to anybody. The 4th floor smelled like bleach and a hint of coffee. A nurse with close-cropped hair looked up and took in my face the way someone takes in a storm moving across a weather map. Ms. Hale, she asked, already standing. I'm Nora. I heard how precise I sounded. Precision is the scaffolding you build when the rest of the structure is gone. I'm Nisha. I'll take you to her. She walked beside me in that quiet, economical pace of people who know exactly how long each corridor is. At a small desk, she paused. Before we go in, there are machines, tubes, swelling. It can be a shock. Her voice carried no drama and no avoidance. Tell me what I shouldn't touch, I said. In this room, think of everything as intended, she said. You can hold her hand on the side without the line. If you feel faint, sit. The curtain pulled back with the same soft sound pajamas make when you lift them from a drawer. The first impression was white sheets of bandage at the temple, the arc of tubing catching the ceiling light. My daughter, my Iris, lay as if the bed had poured itself around her. Bruises climbed along her neck in changing constellations. The ventilator sounded like an ocean heard from down a hallway, rushing and receding. A monitor pulsed a line that spelled out a word I could no longer pronounce. I went to the side where her hair curled against the pillow and placed my palm over her hand. Cool. Our hands used to be the same temperature, I thought absurdly, when we both reached for the same pot and laughed. I'm here, I said, though the room had already known. Nisha adjusted an IV line with a small practiced turn of her wrist. She's sedated to allow her brain to rest, she said. The neurosurgeons relieved pressure. There are rib fractures, a right lung injury. We're watching for complications. Right now, she is holding. Holding, I repeated as if adding my voice might weight the word. Was anyone with her at admission? Nisha looked toward the chart and then back at me, choosing her next words with care. A man identified as her husband signed the initial consent at arrival. He left soon after. We have made repeated attempts to reach him for subsequent decisions. I heard the factual rhythm and felt its edges. What did he say? I asked, as if the sentence could be cured by an explanation I had not yet considered. He didn't say much, Nisha said. He signed, he left. I tried to place the shape of that leaving into a world where it could sit without splitting everything else. My mind stalled. I was good at turning data into choices. I was terrible at comprehending this. I leaned closer to Iris. A small blue mark on her shoulder matched one from when she fell off the backyard swing at 8. You were brave that day, I whispered, because one brave day sometimes makes a bridge to the next. I'm here for all of them. There was movement at the doorway. A man in a white coat, late 30s, trimmed beard, the kind of caution around the eyes that comes from long nights. Ms. Hale, I'm Alejandro Romero, neurosurgery. May we talk at the foot of the bed? Yes, I said. He glanced at Nisha, who nodded and pulled the curtain a little wider to give us all a sense of room. Dr. Romero spoke in complete sentences that placed one steady fact after another. Your daughter arrived with evidence of traumatic brain injury. We took her directly to the operating room to relieve intracranial pressure. The procedure went as expected. Swelling is down. We are keeping her deeply sedated to let the brain rest. There are also orthopedic injuries and a pulmonary contusion. The next 24 to 48 hours remain important. Our teams are coordinating closely. Can she hear me? I asked. It surprised me how quickly that question formed. It's difficult to say, he answered, but familiar voices can be grounding. It's good to talk to her. We watch for small responses as the sedation is lightened and retitrated. What should I do? My voice sounded like a stranger's, polite and almost administrative. Be here, he said. Let us do our part. Rest when you can. Ask questions as they come. After he left, the room felt larger, as if his words had cleared a path that had been overgrown with fear. I pulled the chair close. The vinyl creaked, the sound of a cheap boat tethered to a dock. I told Iris about the pastries cooling on the counter, about the museum guard, who hummed about the way a little girl at the gate had waved at the airplane and made the man beside me laugh. I told her I had thought I would surprise her and that the surprise had traveled in the other direction. Her eyelids did not tremble. Her hand lay slack under mine. Nisha drifted in and out with small mercies, a blanket placed across my knees, a cup of water with a straw bent toward my mouth. Periodically, the ventilator exhaled in a longer sigh, and the monitor traced a hill like a pencil pulled across paper. Holding, I said again, quieter, like a rehearsal of a vow. Hours thinned and then thickened. Someone's laughter came faintly from the corridor and then halted, as if the building had reminded it where it was. I ran my thumb along the back of Iris's hand, an old path. When the overhead light shifted from full to fewer, the window admitted a dawn pale enough to be thought rather than seen. I lowered my forehead until it met the crown of her head. We had done this once when she was feverish at 6. I won't leave, I said into the space where her ear would know me. Not again. Not now. The machines kept their ledger of air. We belonged to their arithmetic for the moment. I sat back, breath measured. Iris lay within the quiet architecture of care, and I, at the edge of it, arranged myself to stay. I stayed. The chair complained every time I shifted, and the ventilator conducted its tide. When fatigue finally made the room tilt, Nisha tapped the back of the chair with 2 knuckles, a signal rather than a suggestion. Stretch, she said. There's coffee down the hall. The ICU corridor had its own weather-hushed currents doors that breathed open and closed the distant percussion of carts. I moved toward the waiting nook, where a vending machine glowed like a small aquarium, and an urn emitted steam with a faint metallic scent. A woman in scrubs was explaining the difference between a wristband color and a chart sticker to a man with a baseball cap. Everyone spoke in lowercase. At the unit desk, I asked if there was a social worker on call. Paperwork finds me in any building. It recognized me now. A woman with a silver streak in her bun introduced herself as Cam. Case management, she said. I'm here for logistics and things that should be simple. Is there a way to see the crash summary? I asked, whatever the hospital has. Cam glanced at the electronic record and nodded. We can request the EMS face sheet and the police incident abstract. It won't include everything, but it's a start. She printed 2 pages that still smelled faintly of warm toner and slid them across. Take your time. I carried the pages to the window ledge. Outside, the day had decided on sun after all. A slice of winter blue sky lay between roofs. I read the language that always believes its own neutrality. Single vehicle rollover. Driver's seat airbag deployed. Front passenger my iris restrained. Speed estimate at impact. Unknown 2 mph. Suspected impairment pending confirmation. Phone recovered from driver's lap. Messages sent within 2 minutes of collision timestamp. The abbreviations lined up as if marching. A number near the bottom, 0.11, pressed itself into me, without drama, the way a bruise does not arrive with sound. Under initial contact, a name Caleb Rourke, husband. There was a phone number I dialed. It rang into a recorded message I had heard a dozen times since they married, the breezy cadence that used to read as confidence. "You've reached Caleb, leave it, I'll grab it." After the tone, I said his name without choosing a sentence first. What followed was too tidy. "This is Nora. Iris is at St. Barrow ICU. Call me." I hung up before my voice could ask who he had been texting in a car moving at a number I could not pronounce out loud. Back in the room, the light had widened. Nisha adjusted the ventilator settings by a decimal that did not change the sound. She angled the chair so I could see the monitor without twisting my neck. "If you rest, it does not mean you are leaving," she said. "It means you are staying longer." I sat. It was the kind of wisdom that did not demand attention. After a while, I reached for my phone. Iris had convinced me to enable Family View on the bank app after her wedding, joking that if a hurricane ever ate the power grid, at least I could pay for batteries. She had set me as the emergency contact with action rights, a decision I had filed mentally, under generous and probably unnecessary. Now the login hummed to life with the ease of habit. Her checking account populated first payroll deposits, grocery runs, a florist charge I wanted to believe was for a classroom bouquet. The familiar litany of an ordinary life. Then the timeline changed its taste. 3 ATM withdrawals in 2 days, all at a coastal town 2 hours south. Hotel charges from a glossy address in Boca Raton pool bar, spa, in-room dining at an hour that did not belong to sleep. A series of authorization holds at a place called Azure Marina. Another line with a charter company's name that sounded like an emotion. My thumb hovered. The numbers were not catastrophic, not yet. They were confidently wasteful. The pattern carried a scent. My impulse was both structural and maternal. I scrolled through permissions. Iris had linked one credit line to household spending so she could accrue points for art supplies for her students. She'd added Caleb as an authorized user 6 months ago. No one is good at anticipating the shape of eventual harm. The toggle for temporary hold sat where it always had a friendly rounded rectangle. I pressed it, and the app asked whether I was sure in a tone that implied most people aren't. I was sure. Before I could second-guess myself, I called Lyle Chen, my contact at Mariner First, where I'd parked a decade of proving competence. He answered on the second ring, voice briskened by recognition. "Ms. Hale, you're back from Madrid already?" "Barcelona," I corrected automatically. "Lyle, I need emergency risk controls. Every account and card where Caleb Rourke appears as primary joint or authorized, whether or not it overlaps with my daughter. He is misusing funds." "I can place hard stops on cards if you have owner authority," he said. "For joint accounts, we'll need. I am the designated emergency agent on Iris's profiles. She set it up after her wedding. You helped us do it." He made the small sound of someone lining up a memory with a protocol. "Yes, the trusted agent designation. I remember. I can issue a fraud freeze on the household line, revoke his user token on the mobile wallet, and flag any attempted transactions for my manual review. We'll need written confirmation within 24 hours. I'll sign whatever you send. I'm initiating now. You may receive activity alerts." I ended the call and for a moment allowed myself the image of a door clicking shut. It wasn't triumph. It was engineering limiting a spill before it reached the carpet. An alert arrived before the thought finished. Declined $1,980. Azure Marina guest services. I didn't know what guest services could be for that amount, besides the rental of something that floats, shines, or both. Another buzz declined $400. Lido House Restaurant. The amounts crawled across the screen like a documentary's lower third captioning. "You okay?" Nisha asked from the foot of the bed, a question that acknowledged its own impossibility. "I'm doing something that feels like doing something," I said. She nodded. Small acknowledgments are a language here. I called the number on the police abstract. A patrol officer transferred me to a Sergeant Lena Park with a voice steady enough to stand furniture on. "We're seeking a formal statement from Ms. Hale when she is medically able," she said, after taking down Iris's full name and date of birth. "The driver has not responded to our calls." "Nor mine," I said. The idea of him ignoring the phone with the same casualness with which I responded to calendar notifications filled the room to its corners. "If you have information on his whereabouts, Ms. Hale, send it to this email," Park said, dictating an address. "Screenshots help." "I may." After we hung up, I opened Instagram as if it could answer for the world's particular failures. Iris never loved the platform. She posted paintings and classroom glimpses measured in months, not hours. Caleb was the opposite professed disdain practiced presence. He did not post often, but when he did, he cultivated the impression that everyone else was a step behind his joke. That old posture made the current silence heavy with intention. I typed his name and found the profile private a padlock where ego used to be. But the internet is a room full of open doors, and people love mirrors. I searched friends of friends until a familiar face surfaced, a man from the wedding, whose handshake had the firmness of a man on camera. Colin Vega had tagged 3 people at a resort whose pool curved like a letter. One of the tags was Caleb. The first image was a sunrise brag towel edges the sea pretending to be tame. The second, a table littered with small plates and the remains of a bottle whose label had been designed for aspiration. The third was a short video where the camera shook on laughter, a hotel lobby. Voices raised off frame, then swinging into view. The edge of Caleb's jaw fleshed a concierge desk beyond him. His voice landed clean through the noise. "Run it again," he said to someone out of frame. "There's nothing wrong with my card." The caption used a tone I had grown to despise when your big shot friend's plastic goes quiet. My thumb saved the clip before the rest of the world could tire of it. Another alert chimed. Declined $3,200, Azure Marina Charter Office. The number had a rhythm that belonged to a watch or a room with a view. I forwarded the screenshots to Sergeant Park with the plainness of someone adding salt to a soup. Then I added the hotel name, the handle of the friend, the date stamps. I do not like assumptions, but I have always loved patterns the way one decision announces its cousins. Nisha reappeared with the thin blanket and placed it across my lap. "You'll get cold," she said. "Bodies do that when they remember things." I did not know whether she meant mine or Iris's, but she was right. The hospital distributes its weather, and you only find out which climate you've been assigned after an hour in it. I drank water from the straw like a child grateful to have the need and its simple answer. Around midday, Cam from case management returned. "Do you need to speak to chaplain services, legal services? Anyone who can reduce the number of tabs open in your head?" she asked. Her phrasing was so exact that I smiled. "I'll keep your card," I said. "Thank you." When I set the card down, the pages, with the crash summary, slid underneath. The numbers there did not soften with rereading. 102, 0.01, texts within 2 minutes. The printouts were already beginning to curl at the edges. I placed them under my notebook, a small domestic reflex. A message from Lyle appeared next, matter of fact, as a weather alert. User C. Rourke removed from shared card. Fraud freeze active. High-risk merchant attempts routed to manual review. I sensed the machine moving on my behalf, a choreography of ones and zeros that did not require anyone's belief. I called Iris's phone out of a reflex I could not defend, setting the volume to its lowest and placing it under the blanket near her arm. On the second ring, her voice filled the space between breaths. "Hey, it's Iris. Paint on my hands or chalk on my shoes?" "Leave it." I resisted the urge to apologize to a recording. When the tone sounded, I said I was still here, that the museum guard had hummed something I later remembered was Debussy, that the pastries on the counter were almond-heavy, but I would pretend they were lighter when she tasted them. It felt absurd and necessary. If speech is a cord, you tie it somewhere. When I ended the call, the phone breathed another alert. Declined $1,450. Cabana Service Azure Pool. I pictured the pool, pale lounger's water that performs itself for photographs, ice melting in clear cubes. The mundanity of luxury had never looked so gaudy. I sent the alert to Lyle. He replied with a single sentence, "We're holding." An hour later, the elevator doors opened and 3 people in suits stepped out. For a second, I misread them as hospital executives arriving to confer about a wing. Then I saw the badges on lanyards. The lead introduced herself as Detective Rana Malik from Traffic Investigations with Officer Nate Bell and Officer Jules Osei. The titles were so ordinary they steadied me. "We wanted to verify Ms. Hale's condition and provide you with our contact," Detective Malik said, keeping her voice at the temperature of the room. "We're working to reconstruct the event. If you have access to phone records, social accounts, or messages relevant to the driver, they help us narrow windows." I sent Sergeant Park some screenshots, I said, from a friend's social media, and there are bank alerts. I can forward those. "Please do." Malik passed me a card. "We'll coordinate with the hospital so we're not in anyone's way." Nisha drifted in with the quiet assertiveness of someone protecting a perimeter. She acknowledged the officers, clarified a boundary or two, then gestured for me to remain seated. The conversation lasted 5 minutes. Malik's pen moved neatly. There were no promises, only verbs. After they left, time settled again. The room held our 3 occupants, Iris, me, and the respiration machine with their breaths out of sync. The ventilator exhaled in a long line. My lungs hesitated and corrected. I warmed my hands under the blanket and then placed my fingers over Iris's forearm, avoiding the tape. Her skin offered the same astonishment as always impossible and ordinary. A little before evening, Nisha brought me a sandwich because, as she said, chewing is an act of defiance. I ate it mechanically and was surprised by the relief. My phone slept face down until it didn't. Declined $3,260. Azure Marina Dock Office. Then, attempted charge, $7, $800. Coastal Yacht Group Manual Review. Lyle's name appeared next. On a call with a merchant. Hold confirmed. Somewhere 2 hours south, humidity on his skin. Caleb's charm was meeting the end of its usefulness. I did not think of it as revenge. If he needed a word for it, the word was stewardship. At some point, the light changed direction on the wall, and the corridor noise shifted from visitors to the industrial ballet of night. Nisha dimmed the overhead fixtures without asking, and the room became a study in instrument glow. A respiratory therapist named Cole stopped in to check the tubing, his hands precise and generous. Everything in place, he murmured, which I chose to hear as a blessing. I took out a pen and wrote in my notebook, because the instinct predates every job I've worked, a list of calls, a list of numbers, a list of names. Camnesia Dr. Romero, Lyle Chen, Detective Malik, Officers Bell and Osei, Azure Marina, Lido, the hotel with the curve in its pool. The act of writing did not transform any reality. It made a map. When fatigue pushed again, I stood stretched the way Nisha had taught me and walked the hallway once. The chapel was empty except for a stained glass panel with colors like citrus. A handwritten note by the door read, "Take a breath. Put it down." I touched the frame and returned. Back at the bedside, the posture of the room was exactly as it had been. Iris lying under the ventilator building its cathedral of oxygen, the monitor dot moving left to right like a day measured in inches. I placed my palm to her hand and let the textures remind me of 1,000 other contact points, rolling dough, smoothing a paper, pressing lint from a sleeve before a photograph. Another alert. Declined $1, $240, Azure Marina Fuel Dock. A final one, minutes later, card deactivated at merchant request. Lyle's message followed. "We've closed the compromised line. I'll compile a transaction digest for you. Rest when you can." I set the phone face down. The chair sighed under me like an accomplice who had learned patience. Around us, the hospital's machines performed their unshowy work. Pumps whispered. Air moved. Numbers recalculated. I traced the back of Iris's hand with my thumb and let the repetition become what it had been when she was small, a way to say, "I am here," without adding to the noise. I woke to the sound of plastic wheels moving somewhere beyond the curtain and the soft knock of Nisha's knuckles on the door frame. The room hadn't changed. My body had. I'd slept in the chair with my chin tilted against my scarf, my hand still covering Iris's. It felt like falling asleep on a train and waking to discover the landscape unchanged and the mile markers altered. "Morning labs are back," Nisha said, glancing at the monitor and then at Iris's pupils as she lifted a lid with the gentlest touch. "Vent settings are steady. Dr. Romero will reassess sedation in rounds." I thanked her. The gratitude had a texture like cloth you know by touch. When she left, my phone lit the underside of the blanket with a small rectangle of weather. An email from Mariner First sat at the top with the subject line, "I would have chosen myself." Consolidated activity, Hale household, Rourke linked. Lyle had attached a PDF and a spreadsheet. The care in the file. Names made something in my chest loosen. The spreadsheet was a map of days rendered into numbers. I scrolled past the clean rituals of Iris's life paycheck, every other Thursday grocery store receipts that read like a list of dinners, tiny charges at the art supply store that added up to a classroom wall of color, then a seam. 2 months after the wedding, transfers began to leave the checking account in round sums, like stones dropped into still water. $300, $500, $2,000. Most were routed to an account at a bank in Georgia tagged to Sloan Avery with a memo line that alternated between emojis and a single letter K. Other transfers branched to accounts in Phoenix and Charleston under names I didn't recognize, then were culled in small increments at a crypto exchange. The pattern wasn't flamboyant, it was tidy. A second attachment labeled Insurance Profile opened to a line that made the edges of my vision grainy for a moment. Vivace Mutual Term Policy taken out on Iris E. Hale 8 weeks after the wedding. Face amount $800, $1,000. Beneficiary Caleb Rourke. Rider accidental death double benefit. I scrolled twice and back again to be sure I wasn't misreading the columns. The premium had been paid from a joint account I didn't recognize, one Iris had never mentioned. I pressed my palm into the blanket over Iris's forearm and spoke into the space beside the cannula. "He doesn't touch this," I said. "Not 1 cent." The sentence steadied me as if it had a handrail. Lyle called a minute later, the way good people do when email is too blunt. "We saw the policy when we ran the cross-institution search," he said. "I'm flagging a hold with Vivash's fraud unit. It's not a block on the policy itself, we don't have that authority, but we can place a notice so any claims trigger human review. The round number transfers are classic structuring. We're packaging those for law enforcement." "Do that," I said, "and send me the complete digest. I'll print it. You'll also get a separate file device logins tied to Mr. Rourke's credentials. Some pings match the hotel Wi-Fi at the Boca property you flagged. We'll keep mirroring attempts. Thank you." After he hung up, I studied Iris's face, cataloging the tiniest changes, a lessening in the tightness of her forehead, a new stillness around the eyes that wasn't emptiness so much as deep rest. Dr. Romero arrived with his team and reviewed the overnight notes in a quiet voice that made me think of chess. "We'll begin a slow lift on the sedation today," he said. "Drift, evaluate, drift. There will be inconsistencies. None of them are verdicts." I nodded. I didn't need predictions. I needed verbs. He had just left when my phone vibrated with an unknown number. Spam, perhaps. I might have ignored it on another day. I answered now because the world had proved it would not be neat. "Ms. Hale," a woman asked. Her voice was careful around the edges, as if each word had been unboxed recently. "You don't know me. My name is Naomi Kincaid. I found your number through a friend who shared a video of a man yelling at a hotel desk because his card wouldn't run. The friend had tagged him Caleb Rourke. I recognized him." She swallowed. "When I knew him, he went by Jason Rourke. He was my fiancé, 2 years ago." I put the call on speaker and brought the phone closer to the bed, aware of how sound can be a bridge. "I'm listening," I said. Naomi's story arrived in squares, each set on the table next to the last. A whirlwind year, a proposal with sudden urgency, a term policy he'd insisted was adulting, and for peace of mind, a night drive home from dinner, a crash that sent her to the hospital while he walked away with a scratch and a plausible explanation, and then the emptying of her small savings over a weekend. "The police said there wasn't evidence of intent," she said. "Just bad luck and poor judgment. When I saw his face in that hotel clip, I knew it wasn't luck. I thought I should tell you. In case anyone will listen this time." "They will," I said. "Not a promise exactly. Thank you for calling. Detective Malik is on the case. May I give her your number?" "Yes," she said, relief and weariness mingled. "I'll tell her everything." After we ended the call, I typed up a summary attached Naomi's contact and sent both to Malik and Sergeant Park. Then I printed the bank digest at the nurse station using Nisha's code and 3 staples the ordinary mechanics of making something real. Back in the room, I set the stack on the small cabinet and returned to Iris's hand. The room had softened its light the way winter mornings will, and the ventilator sighed like a tide under a pier. Around noon, the sedation lift began in quarter turns. It wasn't cinematic. There were no dramatic eyelid flutters. Instead, micro-adjustments asked the body questions, and the body considered them without hurry. Nisha narrated the steps in a low voice, as if she were reminding someone how to breathe underwater. "We'll see a change in respiratory effort. Maybe a frown, maybe nothing. All of this is acceptable." I leaned close. "It's me," I said into the fold of Iris's ear. "I'm here." The guard at the museum hummed Debussy. I looked it up. A shadow crossed her brow. It could have been a trick of the room. Then her fingers shifted under mine, just a feather of movement so delicate it would have been easy to dismiss. I didn't. "Hi," I whispered and felt foolish and right at the same time. Hours rearranged themselves. The unit went through its choreography meals, arrived and left. Shoes squeaked and fell silent. The elevator bell wrote the same small sentence again and again. Late afternoon turned the window into a shy mirror. Nisha checked a series of numbers and nodded to herself, the way good nurses praise the body's small labors. "We'll hold here," she said. "No rushing." My phone vibrated on the chair arm. A text from Detective Malik appeared all nouns and verbs. Driver located Monroe County, taken into custody after attempting to contract a private skipper for international waters. Intake at Marathon Substation. Extradition process in motion. No exclamation marks. The facts did not need them. I forwarded the message to Lyle, and then because I wanted the information to exist in the air, I read it quietly near Iris's temple. "They've got him," I said. The ventilator continued its count unastonished. By early evening, Dr. Romero returned with a respiratory therapist and turned the sedation dial another fraction. Iris's breathing began to add its own signature to the machine's rhythm, hesitant then surer. Her eyelids made a minute, stubborn effort against their own weight and lost. I found that I was smiling not because anything had been resolved, but because effort has a face and it was hers. "Talk to her," Nisha said after the team left. "Remind her what lives outside this room." I talked about the lamp on her desk, whose switch stuck sometimes and how she'd thump it with the heel of her hand. About the second graders who had once solemnly told her that sunsets could only be purple. about the recipe we both pretend is more complicated than it is. I told her the pastries were in the kitchen, and even if they went stale, I would still pretend I bought them for her at a better hour than I had. She made no sign I could swear by, but there was a different kind of resting in her face, less defended. Night came with its hospital choreography. Dimmed lights, the telemetry monitor's screen reduced to a corner glow. Voices pitched to the ceiling instead of the bed. I dozed in the chair and woke once to the sound of the IV pump chirping for attention. Nisha stepped in before the second chirp. In the morning, Cam from Case Management rolled a slim laptop stand into the room. "We can do a brief recorded statement with the detective here if you're willing," she said. "It saves a trip upstairs and keeps us inside our time windows." "Only if it doesn't disturb her," I said. "We'll keep everything soft," Cam replied. An hour later, Detective Malik and Officer Osei sat in the corner with a small audio device lit like a quiet star. The questions were practical confirmation of times, contacts, the contents of the spreadsheet, the provenance of Naomi's call. I answered in careful paragraphs while glancing at Iris between phrases, as if speech itself could be a tether. When they left, I allowed myself a walk down the hall to the little chapel with the citrus-colored glass. I did not pray exactly. I took the printed digest from my pocket and smoothed the creases with my palm, then put it back and returned to the room, because that was the only motion that had a clear direction. By late afternoon, Iris's eyelashes trembled with a human stubbornness I recognized. She made a sound like a door hinge finding a different angle. I stood quickly the way you do when your name is called in a crowded room. "Hi," I said again, absurd and precise. Her mouth moved in a whisper that wasn't yet a word. I leaned so close my hair brushed her cheek. The second try made a shape I knew, Mom. The syllable reached every place in me that had been braced. "Yes," I said, because any other answer would be noise. "I'm here." Nisha smiled without looking away from the monitors. "We'll keep it brief," she said. "The brain is tired." Iris closed her eyes again but didn't slip as far. The ventilator eased back a fraction and her chest met it halfway like a dance learned quickly. I rested my head for a moment on the mattress near her shoulder and exhaled all the air I hadn't known I was storing. 2 days later, measured in naps, lab results, and the ritual of the coffee urn. Cam wheeled Iris awake now for edges of minutes into a first-floor conference room for a controlled conversation. Short Dr. Romero had said, "Paced. If at any point you feel fatigue, we stop." Nisha came along like a lighthouse with legs. The room had that municipal chill shared by libraries and small courtrooms. Fluorescent light made dutiful a whiteboard with a marker that never writes as dark as you need. Detective Malik stood by the door beside Officer Bell. A digital recorder blinked on the table. I took the seat at Iris's left so she could have the right arm free of knees. She looked breakable, casted legs, a fading mosaic of bruises, hair braided back by a nurse, who took pride in symmetry and indestructible in the way of things that have not broken. The door opened and 2 deputies guided Caleb inside. Shackles clinked against the chair legs with a sound engineered to be remembered. He'd been handsome in the curated ways that work at parties, jawline hair with opinions, a suit that knew how to lie. Now stubble blurred the angles and the orange of county clothing removed the illusion of choice. He scanned the room for a power socket and found none. When his gaze landed on Iris, his expression shifted quickly through surprise into a shape he must have practiced, concern softened by regret. "Iris," he said, voice just above a whisper pitched for microphones. "I tried to come. They wouldn't let me." Nisha adjusted the blanket across Iris's lap and then positioned herself just outside the frame of any narrative. Iris looked at him as if he were an object in a still life she was studying for proportions. When she spoke, her voice was thin from disuse but clean. "You signed the first paper," she said, "and then you left." He flinched, then tried on indignation that did not quite fit. "I was a wreck. I made mistakes. But He cut his own sentence short, switching to the kind of half-smile that had once gotten him discounts. "Let's not do this here. We should talk. Privately." "There isn't privacy left," Iris said. The words came slowly, each one placed with care like setting tiles. "The only things left are facts." Detective Malik inclined her head a millimeter, giving the floor to the person who owned it. I opened the folder and slid the first page forward, keeping my hand flat on the second like a parent turning a book with a child. Iris didn't look down. She had already read the pages last night, one hand in mine, lips tightening only at the names. "Who is Sloane Avery?" she asked, eyes still on Caleb's. The name sat in the air as neatly as it had on the transfer lines. "I don't," he began, then recalibrated. "She's a client, a marketing consultant. She fronted a brand collab." I pushed the next page forward with 2 fingers. ACH transfers to an account ending in 7432 at Southeastern Federal Memo Lines dates. He looked at the columns the way a poor chess player looks at the endgame and chose the only piece left: offense. "You don't understand how growth works," he said to Iris, the volume rising. "You teach kids to paint hands. I build opportunities. Those transfers were investments. For us. For us, Iris repeated, polite disbelief bending the syllables. Were the hotel charges at the shoreline for us? The marina holds at Azure, the charter. The thinness of her voice made the list more surgical. Caleb's face registered a flicker of anger he forgot to iron out. You always hold me back, he said. You and your frugal little teacher life. Without me, you'd still be clipping coupons begging your mother. Stop, I said not loud, which made it land. Use my name or don't use me at all. He turned to me with something like relief, an old habit pulling him toward the person he thought would answer. Nora, I know you've never liked me. You decided what I am and then you went hunting for proof. No, I said. You built proof and left it on the counter. Malik cleared her throat, not to interrupt, but to mark the moment. Mr. Work, she said, we have additional questions, but Ms. Hale has the floor. Iris took a breath that was almost ordinary and looked back at Caleb. Tell me about the Vivace Mutual paperwork, she said. The one on my life you signed with the accidental writer. He blinked, miscalculating which lie might fit. That was responsible, he said. I did that for us. Iris didn't look at me, but I felt the current of connection anyway. Naomi Kincaid called, she said. She's alive. She told me about a night drive and a policy with her name on it and how you disappeared after the wreck. She'll tell the detective the same thing. For the first time, he lost the beat. His eyes flicked to Malik, to the recorder, back to Iris, hunting for a misstep in the choreography that would let him cut in. None appeared. The room had its own rhythm, and it did not belong to him. People crash cars, he said. It happens. You were driving, Iris said. Fast. You were texting. I asked you to slow down. Her voice thinned with the effort, and Nisha touched her elbow in a nonverbal question. Iris nodded once. She wanted to continue. You said I was small-minded. You said money should move if it wants to grow. Then the world went bright and loud and nothing. Caleb leaned forward, chained hands pressed into the table, and tried pride as an angle. I make things happen, he said. That's what people like me do. You don't get it. You never did. Things like a boat to Bimini, I asked. You were arrested at Marathon trying to hire a skipper for cash. I hope you tipped. He glared at me, then recalibrated, yet again, a man bargaining with a wall. I can fix this, he said to Iris. I can make calls. Officer Bell stood. The quiet authority of the movement changed the air. That's enough, he said. No shout. The words did their own work. Caleb's shoulders dropped into that posturing slump of men who want the room to know they're being wronged. He looked at Iris for one last gambit. You love me, he said, and the sentence sounded like he had misremembered it. I loved a person you pretended to be, Iris said. The corners of her mouth trembled, not because she was uncertain, but because speech cost more now. I'm done. Malik nodded once, and the deputies took Caleb's elbows and brought him up. The shackles spoke again, same engineered clink, and then he was walking toward the door, pausing only to throw the room a look that had nowhere to land. The door closed with the civic click of a meeting adjourned. Silence didn't so much fall as arrive and take off its coat. Nisha adjusted the blanket the way she might adjust a constellation. Enough for today, she said, addressing Iris but also the room. We're going back upstairs. I pushed the chair closer to Iris's wheelchair and took the handle without thinking. The corridor outside was a collage of tile and bulletin boards and institutional art done in greens. As we waited for the elevator, Iris turned her head toward me, the motion slow and resilient. You kept the receipts, she said, a ghost of her old humor passing through. I always do. I said. You taught me that without meaning to remember the time we returned the lamp, because it was more persuasive than the room. She made a sound that might have been a laugh, and might have been a breath that remembered laughter. In the elevator, our reflections stacked us on the mirrored walls like a family multiplied and thinned. Back in the room, Nisha's hands were all efficiency and kindness. Monitor's reconnected bed lowered a sip of water delivered like a gold coin in a small paper cup. When the floor quieted again and Iris slept, I sat with the folder open on my lap, the pages still warm at the crease where my hand had rested. I read Naomi's number again, then texted her a thank you that did not feel like enough. I sent Lyle a photo of the recorder's red light and wrote statement given. He replied with a thumbs up. I forgave for its modernness and then moments later with a PDF labeled transaction timeline annotated. The neatness of the columns had the comfort of a fence. Outside the window, evening turned the hospital's parking lot into a grid of small moons. I leaned forward and pressed my forehead lightly to Iris's crown the way I used to check for fever when she was 6 and sulking at the table. The machines exhaled and weighted their measured weights. My thumb traced the back of her hand the same old path, and the room settled around us not as a shelter, but as a framework that would hold while we rebuilt our weight. The Mercer County Courthouse smelled faintly of pencils and floor polish, the way public buildings do when they've been scrubbed all the way to their history. Iris sat beside me in the first row, a blanket draped across the cast that still made her movements prudent. A cane rested against her chair, quiet as a folded wing. Detective Malik nodded to us from the aisle. Officer Bell murmured something to the court clerk. Nisha, off-duty and in her own clothes, had slipped in at the back, like a lighthouse taking a different vantage. When the deputies brought Caleb in the room, performed its small intake of breath, and then remembered itself. The county orange dulled him. The shackles made a remembered sound. He scanned for purchase and found none. Judge Alcott read the docket in a voice that could level tables. The charges followed in a clean sequence: aggravated assault by auto-driving while intoxicated, reckless endangerment, insurance fraud, and attempted flight to avoid prosecution. The financial exploitation counts waited in a separate stack like a second weather system. He'd entered a plea. The day was for sentencing. The prosecutor spoke without flourish, laying the numbers down like railroad ties: the speed estimate at the moment of impact, the blood alcohol level, the timestamp messages, the marina attempts, the policy application dates, the transfers to Sloan Avery, the crypto off-ramps. Malik's summaries were in the record. Lyle's digest had become exhibits with blue stickers along their edges. When the defense tried to frame Caleb as a man undone by stress and ambition, Judge Alcott raised a single palm and the room adjusted its posture. "I will speak," Caleb said at last, turning toward the gallery because he had always preferred audiences to judges. "I made mistakes. But I love my wife. I was trying to build a future. Everyone here benefits from people who take risks." "Mr. Rourke," the judge said, "save the sermon for a congregation." He pivoted toward Iris. "Ms. Hale, would you like to address the court?" Iris stood with Nisha's help. The cane clicked once against the tile and then found its balance. She kept her gaze steady the way she taught her students to do when they drew from life. "I woke up to the sound of a machine keeping time for me," she said. The voice was thin but firm. I remembered his hands on a steering wheel and the word small used like a weapon. I remember the room where he told a concierge to run it again because he thought the world owed him more. I don't want to be in this room, but I am. She sat. The judge's pen rested on the bench for a beat that felt like clicking a seatbelt. "Mr. Rourke," he said, "the harm here is not an accident that unspooled beyond your control. It is a pattern. The sentence must address both the violence and its scaffolding." He read the numbers without ceremony: 22 years in state prison, 15 before parole eligibility. Restitution to Iris E. Hale for stolen funds, mandatory enrollment on the state's financial crimes registry upon release, a permanent bar from managing or holding fiduciary authority for others. The gavel struck once. The sound was exactly what it has always been. Wood meeting wood, a door closing somewhere in the building. Reporters waited on the steps, pens lifted the way birds tilt their heads. When they asked Iris for words, she kept them spare. "I'm going home," she said. "That's enough." The cane threaded a patient rhythm down the courthouse stairs, and the winter sun, stingy but present, made the stone bright. Rehabilitation is not a straight line, and hospitals are not the only places with schedules. Spring found us measuring mornings by physical therapy appointments, and afternoons by how far Iris could sit without fatigue. Her hair grew in around the incision line like ivy finding brick. Her hands returned to brushes first for minutes, then for hours. The first painting she finished wore a lattice of cracks made from threads of graphite under layers of acrylic, then a lift of color flashing through the seams. She named it Lightwork and hung it in the living room where the afternoon found it. By autumn, she'd taken the folder of bank digests and police abstracts and tucked it behind tax returns. "A box, not a shrine," she said, slipping the tab into place. On some nights, we ate by the window and practiced ordinary talk, which sounds simple until it isn't the new art teacher at her school, who wore the kind of earrings kids draw. Nisha's dog adopting a stray cat. Lyle switching coffee to tea because his cardiologist had a convincing eyebrow. On other nights, Iris slept before the late news, and I moved around the house with the soft-footed caution of an archivist. Exactly a year after the envelope on the doorframe, we stood in a low-slung Newark gallery as guests moved slowly from frame to frame. The show's title, After the Breaks, was printed small near the entrance. Iris had arranged the work to read like weather clearing, early pieces in tempered grays and bottle glass green, then unexpected saffron, then a blue that refused to be only one shade. In one painting, a single hairline crack ran through a field of pale color and split into a plume of light near the edge, like a seam outgrowing its function. A critic scribbled in a notebook. A retired nurse from St. Barrow cried without apology and squeezed Iris's hand. One of her former students stood with her mother and said in a stage whisper that carried "Ms. Hale makes the sky look like it's breathing." People bought canvases. People asked prices and did not have to apologize for it. The proceeds fed a small foundation Iris had formed with Cam's help to provide microgrants to women untangling themselves from financial choke points, a security deposit here, a retainer there, a bridge where a bridge changes the math. When the doors finally closed, the room exhaled like a stage after a curtain. We stood before Lightwork, the first painting that had refused to let itself be put away. Iris leaned her forehead to mine, a gesture we had used years ago to gauge fevers, and recently to measure a different kind of heat. "He doesn't own any part of this," she said, not as a victory, but as a fact. "No," I said. The gallery hummed lightly, the HVAC, the exit signs, the settled breath of paintings. Outside, the city's winter clocks kept their practical time. Inside, Iris's cane rested by the wall like a punctuation mark you forget is there until you need it. We turned off the lights one by one, left the last glow to the security bulbs, and walked into the evening with our steps aligned, the air cold and honest on our faces. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.